This is not a procurement debate. This is a strategic break. And it begins with a sentence that Washington never expected to hear from Ottawa. Canada has just reopened a $33 billion fighter jet contract, and in doing so, it has exposed a deadly miscalculation at the heart of American policy. For years, the United States treated Canada's Air Force as a captive customer. Donald Trump escalated that assumption into outright pressure, a threatened 25% tariff, whispered warnings about parts access, and an unspoken message from the Pentagon: you don't have a choice. The belief was simple and arrogant. Canada had already ordered 88 F-35 jets. Canada was locked in. Canada would comply. That assumption was wrong. Instead of blinking, Canada called the bluff. Ottawa is now openly pivoting towards Sweden's Gripen fighter, an aircraft that comes with full technology transfer, full domestic assembly, and 10,000 high-quality Canadian jobs. A jet Canada can modify, upgrade, and fly without asking permission. This is where the story turns dark for Washington, because this was supposed to be an easy win for American leverage, a show of dominance, a reminder of who controls North American defense supply chains. Instead, Trump's pressure campaign has backfired, triggering a collapse of trust, a rupture in alliance logic, and a question that should terrify the Pentagon. Why did the United States try to strong-arm its closest ally while Canada was quietly preparing an exit? And more importantly, what else is Canada already building behind America's back? To understand why this moment matters, you have to strip away the politics and look at the hard economics of modern defense supply chains. The F-35 program was never just a fighter jet. It is a vertically controlled ecosystem dominated by the United States, from software code and mission data files to spare parts, sensor recalibration, and electronic warfare upgrades. Every hour in the air costs roughly $47,000, not including downstream sustainment. Over a 30-year life cycle, that cost compounds into a financial black hole for any mid-sized economy. Canada ran the numbers, and the numbers were brutal. Under the current structure, more than 90% of critical F-35 software updates require United States authorization. Engine maintenance, sensor recalibration, and electronic warfare upgrades are bottlenecked through American-controlled hubs. This is not partnership. This is dependence. Now contrast that with the Swedish Gripen. Gripen's cost per flight hour is approximately $8,000, nearly 5 times cheaper. But cost is only the surface layer. The real difference is sovereignty. Gripen allows full source code access, domestic upgrades, and independent operational control. No remote permissions, no foreign gatekeepers. This is where the supply chain logic becomes unavoidable. Canada's aerospace sector already contributes tens of billions of dollars annually to gross domestic product and supports hundreds of thousands of high-skilled jobs. By assembling Gripen domestically through Bombardier, Canada captures value at every stage: manufacturing, avionics integration, maintenance, and future exports. That creates a multiplier effect. Instead of sending capital south, Canada recycles defense spending into domestic wages, research, and industrial capacity. 10,000 direct jobs quickly become 30,000 indirect ones. Universities align curricula. Suppliers invest in tooling. Regional economies stabilize. This is classic industrial strategy, something the United States once perfected but now routinely undermines through coercive policy. Donald Trump's assumption was rooted in outdated leverage theory: control the final product and allies will comply. But modern supply chains do not work like that. They are just-in-time, margin-sensitive, and trust-dependent. Once trust collapses, redundancy replaces loyalty. Canada's decision was not emotional. It was mathematical. And when Mark Carney stated that defense sovereignty cannot rely on another nation's permission, he was articulating a balance sheet truth, not a slogan. The irony is devastating. In trying to extract more control, Washington triggered less dependence, and that sets the stage for the backfire no one in the Pentagon wanted to model. This is where the story turns from strategy to damage. Donald Trump's pressure campaign was designed to force compliance. Instead, it has begun to punish the very industries and communities it was supposed to protect. Start with the American defense supply chain itself.
The F-35 program relies on a sprawling network of United States suppliers, avionics in Texas, composite materials in Utah, engine components in Connecticut, software testing in California. Canada was not just a buyer, Canada was a stabilizer. Its long-term orders smoothed production cycles, reduced per-unit costs, and sustained subcontractors across multiple states. When Ottawa signaled that 72 of its jets would no longer be F-35s, the shock rippled immediately. Defense industry analysts quietly acknowledged that losing a partner of Canada's scale risks increasing per-aircraft costs for remaining buyers. That cost does not stay in Washington. It lands on taxpayers in states like Florida and Arizona, where training bases and maintenance hubs depend on predictable throughput. Then there is the employment reality. In Maine and New York, small and mid-sized suppliers that produce niche components, fasteners, sensors, wiring systems, depend on export-linked contracts. These are not headline-grabbing corporations. These are regional employers. When volume drops, layoffs follow. One Aerospace Trade Association representative summarized the concern bluntly in a closed-door briefing. This wasn't supposed to happen. Canada was the safe customer. Agriculture feels the backlash too. Trump's threat of a 25% tariff was not targeted, it was blunt, and blunt instruments provoke retaliation. Canadian officials began openly reviewing countermeasures affecting United States fertilizer distribution, agricultural machinery procurement, and cross-border energy coordination. In states like Iowa and Nebraska, already operating on thin margins, any disruption to Canadian potash flows or equipment sourcing translates directly into higher input costs. Farmers do not absorb those costs, consumers do. This is the hidden collapse effect. When defense coercion spills into trade uncertainty, businesses freeze investment, logistics firms delay expansion, banks tighten credit, risk premiums rise, not because of war, but because of unpredictability. And unpredictability is poison for the American middle class. Trump framed his approach as strength, but markets interpret it as volatility. Allies interpret it as betrayal. Canada did not escalate rhetorically, it escalated structurally. By choosing a platform it can control, Canada insulated itself from future political blackmail. But the United States did not insulate its workers from the fallout. This is the backfire effect in its purest form. Pressure intended to secure dominance has instead reduced influence, raised costs, and shaken confidence at home. And while Washington argues about optics, Ottawa has already moved on to the next move. While Washington was focused on pressure, Canada was building options, quietly, methodically, and with partners who do not threaten their allies. The IRCGN decision is only the visible tip of a much larger counter-strategy, one designed to make American leverage irrelevant over the next 2 decades. At the industrial level, Canada anchored the pivot through Bombardier. By committing to full domestic assembly and long-term sustainment, Ottawa transformed a fighter purchase into a permanent aerospace platform. Tooling stays in Canada, skills stay in Canada, intellectual property stays in Canada. But the deeper move is geographic. Canada has been rewiring its logistics and defense cooperation away from a single-axis dependency on the United States. Rail corridors are being expanded to Mexican ports. Arctic infrastructure is being hardened with European technology. Maintenance and training doctrines are being aligned with European standards, not American ones. This is where the picture becomes uncomfortable for Washington. Canada is synchronizing defense production timelines with Mexico's industrial expansion and the European Union's rearmament cycle. That means shared procurement windows, shared certification standards, and shared research pipelines. In plain terms, Canada is embedding itself into a transatlantic defense economy that does not require United States permission. The political symbolism matters too. By accepting the first 16 F-35s, Canada preserves North Atlantic NATO commitments while denying Washington escalation. It is a surgical compliance, just enough to maintain alliance optics, not enough to surrender control. Then comes the decisive stroke. The remaining 72 aircraft will be Gripen, made in Canada, serviced in Canada, upgraded in Canada, exportable by Canada.
This is not anti-American rhetoric. This is post-American planning. Officials in Ottawa have been explicit in private briefings. Canada will no longer build national defense around single-supplier political risk. That phrase alone should have triggered alarms at the Pentagon. Instead, it was dismissed. And now the United States faces a reality it once tried to prevent, a technologically capable neighbor that no longer needs Washington as a gatekeeper. Trump believed pressure would force loyalty. Instead, it accelerated independence. Canada did not walk away from the United States. Canada engineered a future where it does not have to look back. And that strategic realignment is already reshaping the global balance, whether Washington admits it or not. This is where the damage becomes permanent. Because power is not just measured in hardware or contracts. Power is measured in trust. And once trust is broken, it does not reset when a president leaves office. The moment Canada concluded that its national defense could be switched off, digitally, politically, or logistically by another country, the relationship crossed an invisible line. From that point forward, every decision had to be filtered through one question: what happens if permission is withdrawn? That question changes everything. Even if Donald Trump exits the political stage, the precedent remains. Allies do not forget being threatened with tariffs, supply cutoffs, or technological sabotage. They institutionalize the lesson. They build redundancy. They diversify partners. They harden sovereignty. This is why the shift is irreversible. Canada's pivot toward Europe is not a protest. It is a structural rebalancing. Defense planners now assume that American policy volatility is a constant, not an exception. That assumption will shape procurement, intelligence sharing, and industrial cooperation for decades. And Canada is not alone. Quietly, defense ministries in the United Kingdom and Germany have begun reassessing long-term dependence on United States-controlled platforms. The concern is not cost, it is control. If software, upgrades, and operational readiness can be politicized, then sovereignty is compromised by design. That creates an opening. China and Russia do not need to outproduce the United States militarily. They simply need to watch as American allies hedge. Every time a NATO partner diversifies away from United States systems, Washington's centrality weakens. China benefits economically. European and Canadian firms gain market share. Joint research accelerates outside American oversight. Standards begin to diverge. Interoperability becomes optional rather than automatic. Russia benefits strategically. Alliance cohesion frays, not through open conflict, but through cautious distance. Countries stop sharing everything. They stop assuming permanence. They plan for contingencies once considered unthinkable. This is the real cost of Trump's aggression. Not a single lost contract, but a cascading erosion of leadership credibility. The Pentagon understands this danger. Internal assessments already warn that Canada's move could become a template. If a close ally can escape the gravitational pull of United States defense dominance, others will ask why they cannot. And once that question spreads, the answer becomes obvious. Power that relies on coercion is temporary. Power that inspires confidence is enduring. The United States just reminded the world which one it is willing to use, and the world is adjusting accordingly. History is ruthless with empires that confuse pressure for leadership. Donald Trump believed strength meant forcing allies into submission. Canada understood something older and far more dangerous. Power without trust collapses under its own weight. This was not about jets. It was about permission, about who controls the switch and who refuses to live under it. By calling the bluff, Canada demonstrated that sovereignty is not declared in speeches. It is built in factories, supply chains, and alliances that cannot be threatened into silence. The United States still has unmatched military capacity, but capacity alone does not guarantee influence. When allies plan for life after you, power quietly leaks away. So here is the question that now hangs over Washington and over every alliance built on coercion instead of respect. If Canada can walk away from dependence on the United States, who will be next? And when that moment comes, will American policymakers finally understand that domination is not leadership, or will they repeat the same mistake again and again? Drop your answer in the comments, because this debate is no longer theoretical.